Formula One fans. This is the Formula One News Hour, and I'm Jonathan Steele, your host. This week it is the Mexican Grand Prix, and we expect to see Max Verstappen break the all-time record for number of races won in 1 year. Of course, it's kind of a strange record because when I was a kid, there was about 7, 8, 9 Formula One races in a year. This year there's 22, and next year there'll be 24. So as Lewis Hamilton put it last weekend in a press conference that we were lucky to attend, he said, you know, the record of winning the most Formula One Grand Prix in a year is not really something that should stand out too much because of the number of Grand Prix there are in a year today compared to what there was yesteryear. But anyway, I would predict that Verstappen will win tomorrow, and that he will go on and hold that record. In the meantime, we've got our history segment this week, and we've got a little bit of news. But first we need to thank those all-important sponsors. The Formula One News Hour is brought to you by Thinology, El American, Inform America, Give, Send, Go, Moms for Liberty, and Off the Press. So please support our sponsors, and as we normally do, we'll pick out one or two during the course of the podcast and bring a special message just from that particular sponsor. But first, let's get to the news of the week, and I guess the big news in Formula One is, I guess, Red Bull has, for want of a better word, acquiesced to Formula One's governing body that said they broke the spending cap in 2021, only, by the way, by a measly $2.7 million. And from what I was reading, if they had filed and paid all their taxes, it would actually only have been $426,000. However, that overage is costing them big time. Not so much in dollars, the fine's $7 million, but they lose 10% of their wind tunnel and simulation time next year. And Christian Horner is estimating that is going to cost them about half a second. If I was Christian Horner, I would take that full 10% at the very first race. In fact, I just would kiss off the first race, maybe the second race altogether, and just accept the fact that, you know, okay, so we're going to lose half a second. That means if the cars stay on the same trajectory as this year, that means they're going to come in third or fourth. The first two races, and then for the rest of the year, they can go on win the championships again. So while Christian is complaining, quite frankly, I don't think if he manages it correctly and gets his very good strategist, Hannah Schmidt, involved, I think that it will not have that much of effect on their record next year and their success next year, because I don't see them sliding backwards. We have watched nicely this year as Mercedes now have gone from really a middle of the pack car team to now the top of the pack. I would say certainly Red Bull team is certainly leading. Now it's become a toss-up between Ferrari and Mercedes for that number 2 spot. Last weekend especially, we watched Lewis Hamilton lose in the end to Max Verstappen, which really showed, I think, two things. It showed, one, how much better the Red Bull car is, but also, as someone said to me that I was talking to on the pit lane last weekend, and that was they felt like Lewis Hamilton has lost it a little bit. The Lewis Hamilton of last year and the year before maybe wouldn't have given up that pass to Max Verstappen quite as easily, especially as close to the end of the race as it was. But I guess we'll find out next year if Lewis is still around and can still put out the performance that we saw from him last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. A remarkable race car driver, if ever there was one. Will never be the GOAT. Talking to some of the guys last weekend at the track, there's a consensus that Jim Clark and Juan Fangio still clearly lead the GOAT title over the rest of the field. And depending on who you talk to, there's some fans or some older guys like me. There's not many of us out there, but the older guys like me that are out there believe that Fangio was the greatest race car driver of all time, and then there's guys like me and others that believe it was Jim Clark, especially saying as Clark still holds a number of records. And one of those records that he holds is over the guy that we're going to talk about the history this week. The history is Emerson Fittipaldi. Emerson Fittipaldi was one of the few guys that managed to get out of driving a Lotus alive and well and happy and safe. So folks, we want to go ahead and thank our first sponsor of this weekend, and that is Give, Send, Go. Give, Send, Go is a crowdfunding entity. Folks, you can't control when bad things happen to you. What you can do is control your choices afterwards and how you get through some of those things that have happened to you. Or maybe they're good things. Maybe you've got an idea for a company and you want to raise funds. But a lot of people are out there raising funds because something bad happened to them. Car accidents or family members got injured, friends or things like that. So you need a crowdfunder that you can go to that has no prejudices and no censorship involved. That is Give, Send, Go. Give, Send, Go can help you get to where you need to be and raise the kind of funds that you need to make your whole life whole again, or maybe a friend's life whole again, or maybe just someone out there that needs help. Remember the guy in Wisconsin earlier this year that just needed help for his attorney's fees, and he went to one crowdfunder and they wouldn't help him at all. Give, Send, Go helped him. And with that help from Give, Send, Go, then he was able to come out the other end of that ordeal whole. So please go to givesendgo.com. That is givesendgo.com. Okay, so on to our history section for this week. And as I said, it's Emerson Fittipaldi. Emerson was born on December the 12th, 1946. That makes him just 4 years older than me. And although I didn't get to see him at the track last weekend, he was there and he was walking around. And out of all the people that I wanted to meet and talk to, he was the only one that I didn't manage to get to and talk to and swap stories from the late 60s and early 70s, which is when Emerson started his Formula One career. He actually started in Formula 2. He is the son of a very famous writer, a motorsports writer from Brazil, and also his mother was from Poland. So his father is Brazilian, his mother's Polish, and between them, they managed to have an extraordinary child in Emerson Fittipaldi. So Emerson started in Formula 2, and the way he got into Formula 1 and got his number one teamship rider was through a tragedy. He started off as the number 3 driver for Lotus in 1970. If you remember, 1970 is the year that Jochen Rindt won the World Championship posthumously. The reason Jochen Rindt won that championship is that Emerson Fittipaldi filled in for him in that race, and which was the United States Grand Prix, by the way. And Emerson went on to win that race. And in winning that race, he blocked Jackie Ickx from being able to claim the title. Now, there are a number of people out there that believe that maybe the win was a little easier because Jackie really wanted Jochen to be remembered as a Formula One champion. Anyway, from that, that was the 5th race, actually, that Emerson Fittipaldi drove for Lotus. The following year, 1971, he became Lotus's #1 driver. And while it was somewhat successful, he did get 3 podium finishes, but the car was still not reliable enough, and the Cosworth engine that they were using didn't deliver the power they wanted. Then he ended up coming in 2nd place. All of that would change in 1972. Emerson Fittipaldi became the Formula One world champion in 1972 at the age of 25. And just a little FYI, he held the position of the youngest Formula One driver for 25 years. So that gives you some idea of the talent that was and is Emerson Fittipaldi, because it's just great to see him out and about and running around I'm 72, so he's 76 years old. I think he looks like in a little better shape than me. Maybe not. Anyway, it's kind of, I got to see him on the monitors, but I never did bump into him on the paddock, which is where when you attend the Formula One races and you get a media pass like we had, or you pay the $8,000-9,000 for the VIP passes, and oh, by the way, that's per day, to get down into the paddock to meet the drivers and meet all the celebrities that are down there. Then it's kind of it's really awe-inspiring. So anyway, Emerson from then, the following year, which would be 1973, was kind of another off year. Lotus struggled, and so Emerson found himself leaving Lotus and going to McLaren. And so he really ended up driving pretty much all of 1973 for McLaren. And 1974 would see him win 5 races and podium another 3, and that would give him his 2nd world championship. So he in 3 years he essentially won 2 Formula One world championships. At the end of that year, he decided to join his oldest brother's Formula One team and help them develop into a powerhouse. Unfortunately, that never did happen, and as Emerson has said a few times, those 5 years were probably the most disappointing of his racing career, especially the last 2 years where he really didn't spend a lot of time driving. He was really trying to help the team establish itself and really get going. But in the end, the Fittipaldi team folded. It went into bankruptcy, and that was the end of that. And that was also the end of Emerson's Formula One career. He would leave Formula One, and by that time it was 1980, and so he would leave Formula One and catch a boat across the Atlantic Ocean and come here to the United States. When he arrived here in the United States, it took him a little while to find a drive and everything, but he started driving for the Patrick team in the kart racing, and actually became a kart champion. I think it was in 1984. And kart, as you know, over time would fold and become and mold into what has become the Indy Racing League, which, by the way, was really forced on the kart team, because the guy that owned the Indy 500 at that time mandated that you had to race so many races in the Indy League to be able to compete in the Indy 500. And so that meant that a number of the teams just folded themselves in and became part of the Indy Racing League, and the kart championships went away. So Emerson would go on to enjoy a probably as successful, or maybe more successful, career in kart and Indy racing. And in fact, he would win the Indy 500 in 1989 and in 1993. Driving in 1989 for the Patrick team, and then in 1993 he was driving for Roger Penske. But he would go on and win another USAC title and other IndyCar titles along the way, not titles but races. He had in all he had a very, very successful time in the Indy Racing League. It was about 1994, 1995. He, after a couple of so-so years, he decided to hang up his racing career. Although he has raced in a number of small races, one in South Africa in particular with his older brother, but for the most part he has actually done something like what we're doing now. He writes a blog for a Brazilian motorsport magazine, and he actually does a blog now for the McLaren team. I guess you could say he's the blogger for the McLaren racing team. So it's good to see him involved in racing. He's probably, out of all of the drivers from that era, when I say era, I'm talking late 60s and 70s, he's probably the most active. He's obviously the youngest, as we mentioned last week. Jackie Stewart and Mario Andretti are in their 80s, and so Emerson is at 76, is kind of maybe 6 to 8 years younger than those guys. Those guys, by the way, as I mentioned last week, are amazing. The fact that Mario was able to drive that car like he did was just incredible. But it's also good to see Jackie Stewart. And it was, as I mentioned last week, great to meet him. We're going to have more on our ventures at the Austin Grand Prix, especially after the season. We've got lots to fill this up right now, but in the off season, of course, we're going to be interviewing drivers, older drivers. We're going to be interviewing hopefully Martin Brundle and Paul De Resti and David Coulthard and a bunch of the older ones, and hopefully get a longer interview with Jackie Stewart, and maybe get an interview with Emerson Fittipaldi and a bunch of others. So we're looking forward to that. But coming up later this afternoon, of course, we have the results of free practice number 3, and also the qualifying sessions for tomorrow's race. Just some newsy bits about the qualifying yesterday. There were actually 4 young American drivers out there doing free practice 1 and 2, out driving Formula One cars in practice sessions. So getting to learn how to handle a Formula One car. Of course, next year, as we mentioned last week, Logan Sargent will become the first American in a very long time to have a Formula One drive. I think the last one might have been Montoya, who went from IndyCar to Formula One back in the 80s. I don't think there's been another. Well, Montoya was an American, was he? So let's see. It would be. I'll have to look it up and get back to you on that. But it's been a long time since we've had. Actually, I know who it was. It was Michael Andretti, who was the last American to be in Formula One. So good to see my brain still working a little bit as I grow older here. But so Mario Andretti was the last American. So it's going to be great to see Logan Sargent in there. And I'm suspecting that we're going to probably see in probably 3 to 5 years, we might see as many as 3, 4, maybe 5 guys, American guys, that are driving in Formula One as they start to build up their super license points. But also, it was quite obvious last weekend in Austin at Dakota track, that crowd that was in Austin, Texas, was the largest Formula One crowd of the season. Over 400,000 people attended that weekend. In Europe, typically, they're getting up there, 320, 360. I think maybe it was Portugal, if I remember rightly, had 380,000. But so far this year, the Austin Grand Prix brought out more fans than any other Grand Prix this year. We had, of course, a great attendance at Miami, and then next year we have the Las Vegas Grand Prix coming up. So the thought process behind Las Vegas was, well, we've got one on the East Coast in that time zone. We've got one in the central time zone, and now one going into the mountain Pacific time zone. And that helps bring out a bunch of not only different people from within the United States, but from other parts of the world as well. So it's a lot easier, as an example, to get to the west coast of the United States from Singapore and Japan and things like that than it is to Austin or to Miami. So a lot of thought process has gone in to help to where these Grand Prix take place. Off the Press, as I mentioned before, is a news outlet that provides its viewers and its listeners with news, not opinions from overpaid anchors that sit in a studio not reporting the news but reporting their opinions, and maybe not just their opinions but the opinions of a particular party that is promoting them and paying them, whereas Off the Press is going to give you good hard facts. So if you want to get some news and get the good hard facts, go to Off the Press. That is offthepress.com. So later today, we're signing off, and we'll be back later. Welcome back, Formula One fans, and in just a few moments, qualifying for the Mexico Grand Prix is about to get underway. In the meantime, we can tell you that coming out of Free Practice 3, Max Verstappen turned in the best times. So the Red Bull domination continues. It's going to be interesting to see here this afternoon who is going to end up on pole position. Last week, if you remember, Carlos Sainz ended up on the pole, which maybe was the worst thing that could happen to him because his race lasted all of about 15 seconds when he got taken out of the race by George Russell. George Russell, incidentally, only got a 5-second penalty for that, so that's kind of interesting that he took a guy completely out of the race and only got 5 seconds. But anyway, that's the Formula One body's decisions. This week, Kevin Magnussen took a new engine, so he will take a three-spot penalty. So doesn't matter where he ends up. And of course, the Haas teams have not done that well throughout the year, but to their credit, they've done a much better job this year than they did last year. But still, I don't expect Magnussen to qualify. You know, maybe gets into qualifying 2, but that would probably be about it. So let's say he ended up in the top 15. He takes a three grid penalty stop. Then wherever he ends up, then he will end up 3 spots below that. So anyway, like I said, the qualifying is about to start here in the next few minutes, and we'll watch some of it and then bring you the results as we see them come in. It's going to be exciting. Incidentally, this track has a lot of turns on it. There is, I think, 17 turns, and there are 51 gear changes during the course of the laps. So a lot of activity for the drivers. And these turns are quite nasty, as it were, because the drivers really can't kind of straighten the corner out like they can in a lot of other tracks, where Austin was a good example of that, where even on the complete almost U-turn on turn 9 in Austin, the drivers can take that corner and in a way kind of straighten it out. But here the corners are such, and the track is much narrower, that they can't just straighten the corners out like they can on a lot of other tracks. So it's going to be interesting to see who ends up at the end of the day in the pole position. I would not take your money off Ferrari. The Ferrari cars all year have been very good in the corners, and there's a lot more corners on this track than there are straightaways. and the corners favor Ferrari over Red Bull. And it's going to be interesting to also to see how Mercedes does. Mercedes have looked pretty good through the free practice 3 era here, so it's going to be interesting to see where they end up in the qualifying at the end of the day. Obviously, the upgrades that Mercedes made to their cars in Austin, it paid off for them a little bit in Austin. Here, the very interesting thing is this track is some 2,200 meters above sea level, so the air is thinner. So that means that the cars of Mercedes especially are not going to have that downforce, such a great downforce drag, slowing them down on the straightaways. But then also, neither are the rest of the cars, but still, it could favor Mercedes a little bit, not having such severe downforce drag on the straightaways. American. As you've heard me say before, American is an internet-based TV network that broadcasts in both English and Spanish. And unlike other TV networks, there's no propaganda, there's no opinions, there's no people in the background telling them exactly what to say and what not to say. We've got reporters on the street reporting what is going on, giving you real legitimate news on an up-to-date basis in 2 languages. That's right, in 2 languages. American broadcasts simultaneously in both English and Spanish. And of course, this weekend, we're going to have a lot of Spanish viewers. The hometown favorite of Checo Perez is going to bring out all of his fans both in Mexico and of course here in the United States. So when you have a chance and you want to get some real news and you want to watch it in Spanish, you Spanish Formula One fans, please go to El American. That is elamerican.com. Okay, so in just a few minutes, I'm going to bring you the first numbers coming in, the first positions coming in from the qualifying Q1 session. Okay, so we are 8 minutes and 35 seconds left in the Q1 session, and we have Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell, and Sainz all in the top, and we have Stroll. Got to put my glasses on here, folks. We have Stroll, Bottas, Ocon, Zhou, and Albon in the bottom 5. Did you notice who is not in there? The guy that is not in there is Last Latifi. That's not kind, Jonathan. It is. Latifi is not in the bottom 5 with 8 minutes to go here in qualifying session 1. Okay, so at the end of Q1, surprise, surprise, Lewis Hamilton has just bumped Max Verstappen off the top spot in terms of time. And so now it is Hamilton, Verstappen, Leclerc, Bottas. Valtteri Bottas is up there in the 4th position, followed by Carlos Sainz. So a really nice run today for both the Ferraris, because they're both there still in the top 5. And Valtteri Bottas, which he's just got to be absolutely thrilled with what's going on with him and his car today. Because like I said, the last few weeks, in fact, a few weeks ago, he's having a hard time making it out of Q1. So he's suddenly found the right makeup for that car. They've got all the settings right. And obviously that car enjoys the lighter air there in Mexico City as well. So anyway, so as we go into Q2, then Hamilton's got to be happy that he's got the fastest time. Those people that are not happy are Mick Schumacher, Vettel. Sebastian Vettel not being out of the getting up into Q2 or Q3 in that Aston Martin. That is a very, very strange thing. So on top of that, we have Lance Stroll, Alex Albon. What has happened to Alex Albon this weekend? Because like I say, he's consistently been up there in the top 10, qualifying and winning, and not winning, but finishing the race in the top 10. So something's not happy with the Williams team this weekend. And of course, Nicholas Latifi has come in last again at the end of qualifying one. Probably the good news for Nicholas Latifi is no matter what happens, he is not going to start the race from that position, because as the grid penalties come in, there will be those, and maybe Kevin Magnussen is one of them, that will take his place as the last starter of the race tomorrow afternoon. So we are now we're about 5 minutes to go in Q2, and Lewis Hamilton is maintaining that top spot in terms of qualifying, and if he can maintain that, Lewis Hamilton might just find himself on the pole for the first time this year. He's followed by his teammate George Russell. So those Mercedes are really enjoying this lighter air. Obviously, whatever problems that George Russell was having with his brakes, they seem to have solved, because you're not going to get up to the second fastest time if you don't have the braking capabilities going into the corner. So interesting things happening here right now as Mercedes has taken a 1 and 2, followed by, this is great, followed by Valtteri Bottas. Bottas is in position 3, where he's consistently been 3 or 4 pretty much all afternoon. So that Alfa Romeo car is really reacting well to the environment here. It's able to handle these really tight corners, and they are tight, as I said earlier. There's a number of drivers are having their times, their laps deleted because of going over track limits. And so it's going to be really interesting seeing if when we get into Q1 and it really starts to get tight and the drivers really start pulling it on, just how much are these track limits going to affect the drivers going into that. So Max Verstappen now has fallen down into 4th place, followed by Fernando Alonso in 5th. We've got the Ferraris really have dropped down to 6th and 8th at the moment. So don't know what's happened with the Ferraris. That's kind of surprising to see them down there in that position. Followed the folks that might not make it through to Q1 are Tsunoda, Perez. That's really surprising. Perez at the moment is down in 17th position, followed by Joe Guan Yu and Gasly and Magnussen. So Magnussen just barely made it into Q2, and right now he is on the bottom of Q2. So if he was to end up there, then Magnussen will drop 3 positions. So he will start in position 18 and not 15. So that's kind of strange. The good news is he made it through into Q2. Bad news is he will not start right now, the way things finish up, he will not start above position 18. So we want to take this moment and thank another one of our sponsors, and we're going to thank Thenology. Thenology is a data center, an independently owned data center in Austin, Texas. You know, these cars and businesses generate a lot of data today, and there has to be somewhere to store that data. Yes, there's the big tech guys, but when you want really personalized service and want someone that can really look after you, that has both a public cloud and a private cloud and co-location facilities and disaster recovery facilities, then you need to start thinking about the independents. And Thenology is one of those independents. Located right here in Austin, Texas, Thenology is the place that you should visit and want to store all your data and your servers. And if you want a private cloud, it's a great place to go. Get your websites hosted, develop your websites, develop your gaming. Everything that you could want to do in a single site is right there at Thenology. So go to Thenology.com. That is Thenology.com. Okay, so let's look at the standings at the end of Q2, and I guess a little surprise, not surprising really. Hamilton has ended up Q2 in the number 1 position. Now he is followed by Carlos Sainz. That we kind of expected to see, but now we see that Verstappen and his teammate Sergio Perez. Perez has come a long way up. He's now in 4th position with Verstappen in 3rd position, and we think that's kind of a surprise. and Valtteri Bottas has dropped down to 5th. But still, a great, looking to be a great day for the Alfa Romeo and Valtteri Bottas. Those that did not make it are Ricciardo, Joe Granu. Kind of interesting. He's had a good season, and then Yuki Tsunoda and Gasly and Magnussen. And we talked about Magnussen a little earlier. So Magnussen maintained the bottom spot, and he will drop down to 18th on the starting grid tomorrow. So interesting to see Joe Granu down there, because he has consistently been up there during the year. When I say up there, he's done a good job of making it into qualifying 3, but that's not going to happen today. And Ricciardo, not such a bad day for him, coming in qualifying 11th. Much better than last week, where he qualified 23rd. And actually, I think he ended up the race all the way down there. One of the last remaining guys that was actually running on the track. So Ricciardo has really struggled, not just this entire season, but even more so in Austin last week, and it looks like today in Mexico City. So we'll have the start of the qualifying, the Q3, which will give us who is going to be on pole position starting tomorrow in Mexico City. So halfway through Q3, and Verstappen has taken the lead again, followed by followed by George Russell, and then Perez, and Carlos Sainz and Valtteri Bottas. So Bottas is maintaining that top 5 position, which is just great to see. We had a discussion with Valtteri Bottas last week, and we'll talk about that more after the season ends. But it was a very personable, very nice young man. And what's interesting is that Lewis Hamilton has dropped all the way down to 8th. And from what I've been watching and reading, he has had 2 lap times taken off him for exceeding track limits. Remember what I said, that whole car, if it goes out and over those, the side of the track where it has the red and white lines, if the whole car goes outside of that, then that outside of track limits, so those laps are deleted from their times. So, as they go from Q3 to Q2 to Q1, they lose their times as they start each qualifying session. Everybody's starting from 0 again. So it looks like Lewis is struggling to keep his car on the track right now, but he's still got plenty of time. We've still got around 6 minutes left in Q3, and we'll see in a couple of minutes. We'll check back and we'll see just whereabouts we're headed, and who we think is going to win pole position. Right now, if it was to end right now, of course, Max Verstappen would end up in pole. There's an interesting fact here about the Mexican Grand Prix, that in the 10 previous races, here I'm acting like I'm in Mexico, the 10 previous races in Mexico, there has been 10 different pole sitters. Will this be the year that delivers the same pole sitter for twice in the same 10 years? So this will be 11 years. So if we get a different pole sitter today, that will be 11 consecutive years that there has been a different pole sitter that has ended up starting on the grid on race day. Here's another interesting thing. Not one of those pole sitters has won the race. Most of the time, the person that wins the race here in Mexico, there I go again, acting like I'm in Mexico. Those guys, they're in Mexico. The position that normally wins the race starts from 3rd. So let's see who is going to start in the grid in the 3rd position, and we might be able to say that's the winner tomorrow. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and finish out watching here the qualifying to see who is going to be on the pole. Okay, before we give you the pole position runnings, let me just thank another sponsor. This time, let's go ahead and thank Moms for Liberty. And one thing I'd like to correct as we give Moms for Liberty the due for supporting us. I have been saying go to momsforliberty.com. In fact, it is momsforliberty.org. And of course, I had to eat a lot of crow and call him up and tell him that I was very sorry for doing that. It just comes out of habit. But anyway, Moms for Liberty is a conservative organization that is trying to get parents more involved with the school boards and more involved with the education of their children. Too much today is being dictated by the school boards and by the teachers and on what our children are learning. They're not learning math and English and science. They're learning about transgender. They're learning about gay. They're getting shows, drag shows from drag queens. This is not why our children go to school. They go to school to learn math, English, science, history, those types of things. Moms for Liberty is an organization. They've got about 185 chapters, I believe it is, around the United States that is focused on getting the right people into the school boards and then forcing the teachers to get back to teaching children what they need to learn instead of what these I would call them progressives want to teach them. Why they think a 5 or a 7-year-old should know about transgenderism or witness a drag show, I just don't get it. Neither do Moms for Liberty. So please go out and support momsforliberty.org. That is momsforliberty.org. Okay, so now we can bring you the results of the qualifying and who is going to be on pole tomorrow. We are going to have, for the 11th straight year, a different pole sitter. This year, the pole sitter is Max Verstappen. Yes, Max Verstappen has finally made it to the pole. There I go again. It's because I was at the race last weekend. So Max Verstappen has made pole position in Mexico City. Strangely enough, he is followed by George Russell. That is, I guess, a surprise, because I have been saying to a number of folks that I'm close to around here, has George Russell received team orders not to outshine Lewis Hamilton, because he had been doing such a great job for a number of weeks, and then the last, I'm going to say 4 or 5 races, he has been really down in the pack. Not the George Russell that we saw at the beginning of the season. Well, today we're seeing the George Russell of old, and he is in 2nd position. Now, here's some interesting news, guys. The guy in 3rd position is Lewis Hamilton. Can Lewis Hamilton follow in the footsteps of a lot of other guys in Mexico City and win the race tomorrow? It's going to be really exciting to watch, and really, this if Lewis doesn't win a race tomorrow, this will be the first year in a long, long time that he hasn't won a race. So Hamilton is then followed by Perez. So in the top 5, actually the top 4, we've got both Red Bull and Mercedes. And they're followed by Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. So Carlos Sainz came through at the end of qualifying and outdid his teammate Leclerc. And then, so Valtteri Bottas dropped out of the top 5. He is starting 6th. But I think that he has got to be thrilled with that position. Starting number 6 tomorrow. He's had a great qualifying session. And I think with his capabilities, he won this race here in Mexico City, I think it was 2 years ago. So he would love to return, to winning the race, but I'm sure at this point of this season, he would be great. He would be really happy with a podium finish. So that's going to be really exciting to watch. So finishing out the bottom is we have Norris, and then the 2 Alpines of Alonso and Ocon. So it's going to be a fun race tomorrow. It's going to be exciting because of these tight turns. It's going to be interesting to see if Red Bulls will manage to maintain their big speed advantage down the straightaways. I think last week over Mercedes, they had something like, on the straightaways without DRS, they had about 12 or 13 kilometers an hour. With DRS, it was up there at around 30 kilometers an hour, 33, I think Lewis Hamilton said at one point. So it's going to be a really, really interesting race. We look forward to bringing it to you. So until tomorrow, when we will be bringing the Mexico Grand Prix to you as it happens, this is Jonathan Steele saying good night.